So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm really grateful to be here and honored that I was asked to play a small part in talking about hope. Um, I think hope is a very difficult concept because it talks about expectation. It talks about trust and reliance upon something or some dream or some um, some other people. As a Buddhist, from the beginning, I was taught that to practice meant that I would have a level of expectation, that something would happen as a result of my following this particular path. And I was between the ages of 11 and 13 when I first encountered Buddhism. And I actually jumped into it because my mother told me not to. Um, and at that age, that's what happens. And she was the one who decided that I was able to go to such a meeting and had to deal with the consequences of that decision. I really liked it because I didn't have to believe anything. I only had to just chant these words and wonderful things would happen. So at that age, that was a piece of cake. Because when I think of what I was exposed to earlier, going to the various churches I attended in the military, my dad was in the military, so all of the churches I went to were essentially non-denominational except for being Protestant. And every time I had a question, I was always told, you just have to believe it. And I thought, what do I believe in when I can't see what's happening? So Buddhism offered an opportunity to have this expectation that my life would actually change if I followed the path. And so that sounded relatively simple, and it sounded something like something I could do. And I also liked the foreignness of it in a sense that it wasn't in English and there was incense. And I should let you know that I am African and Japanese descent. So this was, in a way, of coming home because it allowed me to access my culture as an Asian person, which was previously not available to me. So I was in a community of Japanese war brides and their children. And so this opened up a sense of belonging, a sense of home that I could not capture anywhere else. I learned a lot about craving and attachment because when you're told that you can chant for things that you want, then of course that's what you're going to do. And when it doesn't happen, there's disappointment. But then I started to learn more about the teachings themselves, which spoke about an aspiration for awakening, an aspiration for a higher sense of living, an aspiration for commitment to causes greater than myself. That there was some value in being alive, some kind of inner freedom that was available for each of us simply by taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, or teacher, teachings, and community, to really rely on those things. And that's when my real practice actually began, when I started to aspire for the truth of what these concepts would deliver to me. And as a result, I did gain some level of wisdom. And even today, I continue to experiment because experimenting is the foundation of hope. That we still have this idea, we get the theory, we come up with a hypothesis, and then we go for it and see what happens. And that is the mind of a child, to keep constantly exploring our world, exploring the range of what our particular faith tradition can do for us. Now, some would argue that Buddhism has little to offer in terms of hope, because the first concept most people hear about is the Four Noble Truths, the first of which is that life is suffering. And I've had many folks ask me, Isn't that kind of nihilistic? You know, why would you hang around for something that told you life was suffering? And then you have to listen to the rest. There's an end to suffering. There's a cause of suffering, excuse me. Then there's an end to suffering. And the end of suffering is the Eightfold Path. What this indicates is that the end of suffering is totally within our hands, because to follow the Eightfold Path requires our action, not from outside, but everything is actually working from inside. So even if you don't believe in that, I think all of us are raised in some form or fashion to have what we call right view, a right thinking, right speech, action, living, effort, mindfulness, and meditation. I think you can find that everywhere in whatever tradition exists. And whether we believe it or not, that life is suffering means all of us suffer aging, birth, aging, sickness, and death. None of us, no living thing escapes those particular sufferings. Those are inevitable. You can't change it. You can't stop it. There's nothing you could do about it. And that's the beauty of that particular concept, is that we can accept that as a reality because it happens. No matter what we can do, we cannot stop it. And we spend tons of money and effort trying to stop all of those things. And the embrace of the truth of that is what leads to our liberation, what leads us to have hope, what leads to an expectation that, yes, this is reality, but it also connects us to the whole universe of life, because every part of what we know of the universe, what we know of life, is undergoing the same thing. It doesn't matter what it is. And that's something that we all need to awaken to, the fact that we are connected. We're not separate. Each one of us has an impact on every other being out there. And that's something I think Buddhism offers us very clearly. I suspect it's the same in other faith traditions as well, because we're all after the same thing, the truth of happiness for every individual. So we ask sometimes, why bother? If this is it, what hope is there for us in the future? And the hope comes about because of our aspiration for awakening, our aspiration for the truth, our aspiration to continue to live the very best life we can. And the fact that we can transform suffering, even in the face of great uncertainty, is such a gift for all of us. When we face this, when we address it and recognize that each time we face all of these situations in our lives where things might appear hopeless, and that we might be helpless, then we realize we have grown and become wiser and more able to deal with the world exactly as it is. This is what we learned from the story of the Buddha when he was sitting under the Bodhi tree, struggling with temptation, the armies of Mara, all of the things that he faced, that he was able to completely be helpless, completely give in to the fact that there's nothing he could do about what was happening except to embrace it and try to change it. And he was able to transcend then the limitations of what he thought himself to be. And because of this, he awakened to the reality of all things. And what is that reality? We are connected. We are interdependent. Much like, if you've heard of the term Indra's net, that we are, when the connections between us, like the fisherman's net, at each nexus of that net, we are connected to each other. And every time something hits where we are, it also travels around the net and hits other beings, other spaces. So everything that is happening to us, we learn as Buddhists, is happening for our benefit, for our good. Think about that. Why would anyone believe that a pandemic is good for us? That climate change is good for us? That racism, hatred, misogyny, all of the things that are happening for us right now. And it's happening because we are ready to deal with it. Because what we've learned from the stories of the Buddhas and the other founders of various traditions is each one of them recognized that all of the obstacles and turmoil they faced in their lives was preparation, was an indication, because of the difficulty, that they were indeed given a mission through the causes and conditions they made in their own lives to tackle major issues. And all of us have that opportunity as well. When we confront the things that make up the path of our lives. For example, as an African Japanese descendant, why would I come back as a female, as a biracial person, in a time where there's such hatred for both, the intersectionality for both of those particular categories? And I used to ask myself that until I understood that I was uniquely qualified to deal with those situations from a different perspective that maybe someone else didn't have. And because of that, I didn't have to be hindered by it or even beat down by the experiences I had as a result of that. That I could overcome each of those limitations imposed from the outside by strengthening what was available inside. And so through this kind of action in the path, along the path, I have learned to encounter every situation, every negative, even every joyful thing as something I can use essentially to turn poison into medicine. Because even a good thing, too much of a good thing, can lead us astray. Too much negativity can lead us astray. And so our ability to harness those negative and positive situations and use them for our benefit is that we can always return to the point of why we became engaged in faith to begin with. One of the vows that we recite daily is sentient beings are innumerable. I vow to save them all. And the Buddha said, I am always thinking, how can I cause all living beings to enter the way and quickly become Buddhas? So from the very beginning of our practice, we are taught to practice for self and others. And we practice for self in order to be capable of practicing for others. So we get to a point of realizing that our practice for self is completely practice for others. Simple things, such as how you greet someone when you meet them at the store, or that you hold the door open for someone. That is a practice for someone else that is also a practice for yourself, because it opens your heart even wider every time you engage in such practices. And after a while, it becomes simple and second nature. We have several examples in our tradition. There is one called Bodhisattva Jofukyo, and his very simple practice was simply bowing to every person he met and saying to them, I respect you. I'll never despise you. I know you'll be a Buddha someday. Imagine that as your practice. And one of the things that I have witnessed profoundly, because I do prison ministry, is having inmates do this practice to alleviate the tensions and the stresses of the greed, anger, and ignorance that governs their situation. And it's been a powerful thing to witness how they can find value in their own lives from treating others well. Another bodhisattva is Caine, or Kuan Yin, or Avalokitesvara, or we know the living example of that is the Dalai Lama. But Caine is known as the hearer of the world's cries, and Caine responds to all those individuals who call upon her or him, because Caine shows up according to the needs of those who call and saves them from their suffering and leads them to a better place. And so we ourselves can live in a way that embodies this particular kind of behavior, that we show up as needed and how we are needed, not according to what we believe should happen for others. That we show up open to the possibility of our ability to respond, to help fulfill the Buddha's wish for all beings, that all beings can be awakened to the truth of their own liberation, their own value, and filled with hope so they can continue no matter what. We also learn to share the teachings simply by the embodiment of our lives, that we take in the teachings and try to live them 100%. This is a great source of hope for all of us, because if any of us can change simply by following the teachings of the Buddha, then anyone can change. And to take on that mission of being able to confront society and respond to it in a way that shows the truth of one's faith, one's life, one's aspirations. We learn also that we need everybody. And so our hope is that by embodying the teachings of the Buddha, that we are able to then share with others who become willing to join us. It's probably one of the reasons that so many of us today are engaged in interfaith, because we understand that according to our teachings, it's better for 1,000 people to take one step than for one person to take 1,000 steps, because we cannot do it alone. When we realize that the whole of the universe is striving towards awakening, and we see evidence of it every day in all of the encounters that we have with each other, in all of the sharing that we do with each other, there is profound and deep hope that we can change the world, because we're all important to that process of awakening. And we know the expressions that we've heard time and time again, it's always darkest before the dawn. What we also say is there's never been a time where winter was not followed by spring, right? And hope springs eternal when we are confronted with the notion of spring. And this is what we're striving for, to really understand that all are necessary, all are capable, all are equally needed to be engaged so that we can make the world the place we want it to be. And that is what we as Buddhists would call the eternal Buddha's Pure Land, where people can recognize the Buddha within each and every one of us. That all of these things, even as we are angry, even as we are sad, even as we continue to strive to find a way to make a change, we are still at the root of everything endowed with a Buddha nature, or Christ-like nature. All of us have that. We just need to recognize it, to know it, to accept it into the way we live our lives, and base every bit of our hope on it. Because that's what keeps us going. The hope, the aspiration that we are here for a purpose, that we each have a mission that is uniquely ours, that each one of us can contribute to the larger picture, the larger scope of what's happening. And so we need to know that even in the face of all the problems that we're seeing at this moment, this is our call. This is our time, that we have to step up. That the greatest mistake would be for us to turn our backs on all these troubles and blame it on someone else. The greatest gift that we have to offer is our hearts, our minds, our bodies, to say, I take full responsibility for my part of this world, and I will join with anyone else who walks with me. This is the hope, I believe, is at the foundation of all faith traditions. The wise hope that comes out of our experience of interacting with each other. The spiritual hope that says, I have a purpose I alone can fulfill. The spiritual hope that says, my liberation is tied up with yours. And until we are liberated together, none of us will be free. This is our season. This is our time. And if we can all just embody that, we will all find our own personal liberation based on the fact that it already exists within us. Thank you very much. Now, I do want to share with you our chanting. And one of my friends told me that it has something to do with what therapists call bilateral stimulation. I hope that's the right term. So there are two ways to do this. One is simply by chanting it and being still, but another way is one that brings with it a great deal of laughter and joy. So for the times when you need laughter and joy, we have an answer. So I'm hoping that I can do this in such a way that you can see. Now our chant is Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. And if you could make me a co-host for a second so I could just show that on the screen.
Working on it.
Okay.
Maybe that only a certain number of us can be co-hosts. So let me see.
Okay.
I just made you a co-host, Myokei.
Thank you. There you go. That's what it looks like. Namu means devotion or respect for. Myoho Renge Kyo. Myo means wonderful or rebirth or to open. Ho is Dharma or law. Ren Ge is white lotus. And Kyo is sutra. So
okay. So sorry to interrupt. If you had put something on the screen, I don't think it's, at least I can't see it. I don't know if anybody else can see.
No.
Maybe didn't share. Yeah.
I thought I did. Certainly showed up on my screen.
There we go.
Okay. So what we're saying is devotion or respect for Myoho Renge Kyo, which is the title of our primary sutra known as the Lotus Sutra, thought to be the Buddha's highest teaching. So it's devotion, respect for to the Sutra of the Lotus Flower of the Wonderful Dharma, is how you would say it in English. So this is what we chant. And it is thought to contain all of the teachings of the Buddha in his highest form. And when you chant it, actually you're chanting all of his teachings in the Lotus Sutra. So okay. So the first thing, Namu is in this position. Can you see this? Wait. Okay. Namu is here. Myo is on your lap, on your legs, because you can't see me do that. Myo. Then Ho is out to the right. Ren is back down. Ge is the left. Kyo. Back down on your lap. Nam is always here. Namu. This the first one, so I can see if I can stand up a bit. Maybe that will help. The second is Namu, Myo, Ho, Ren, Ge, Kyo. The third one, Namu, Myo, Ho, Ren, Ge, Kyo. So Namu, Myo, Ho, Ren, Ge, Kyo. Namu, Myo, Ho, Ren, Ge, Kyo. Namu, Myo, Ho, Ren, Ge, Kyo. So the first is negativity, Namu, Myo, Ho, Ren, Ge, Kyo. Negative out. Namu, Myo, Ho, Ren, Ge, Kyo. Benefit in. And the last is we're uplifting the Buddha's teachings. Okay. So would you like to try that for a few minutes? See how that works.
Yes, please.
Okay. So Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. 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 So you might ask, when does it get to be fun? Or when does it get to be funny? And I kept the pace relatively stable. What happens in a group is that you start to get faster and faster so that everybody's, and while the idea is to try to harmonize with everyone. If you watch people, then you will start to mess it up on your own. If you internally focus on what you're doing, then you can keep it going for yourself. The other way we do this is by using the drum. So I will get with the drum here. And try not to beat it too hard. This is probably one of the deepest pleasures of my life, is to beat this drum. So, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, 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 Mu Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, Mu Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu 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 Myoho Renge Kyo, Mu Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu 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 Myoho Renge Kyo. So as you can see, this particular order is not a silent one. We make lots of noise, have lots of percussion instruments that others can play. We do marching with drums and everything. A lot of people don't understand this as a form of meditation. But what happens is that as you are chanting, your mind is taken over to chanting in harmony, chanting the correct rhythm, the correct pronunciation. So it tends to calm the monkey mind without effort because you're focused on something else. And what actually happens, I think we could safely say, is that the embodiment is the result of the polishing of the mirror of your life. And so we can't explain how that happens, but Myoho, wonderful Dharma, suggests, or mysterious Dharma, is often a translation of it, is that it just tends to work on the parts of you that are needing healing. And of course, there's no scientific way for me to show you how that happens. But all of the evidence comes from those who practice and being able to find their own access to the wisdom and compassion of the Buddha. And how it works is how it works for each and every one of us. Without belief and only the expectation that it might help. And later, once you see the results in your life, then we could start talking about faith and belief. Thank you. Are there any questions that you might have?
Maybe while y'all are thinking about questions, or questions are emerging, I might just say, one, thank you. Two, it's so cool that something so beautiful and powerful came out of an act of disobeying your parents. Um, uh, and and three, just as an initial question, I would ask, can you talk? You talked about spiritual hope. These three different elements of spiritual hope, or maybe there are more. But the first one you talked about was understanding that I have a purpose I alone can fulfill. And I'm just curious if you have any reflection for us about how we can understand or come to know that purpose.
It's like following your heart, following the things that make you happy, that make you feel like this is what I'm meant to do. For the longest time, I refused to even consider being a teacher because everybody in my family was, all the women were teachers. And I thought, I'm never going to do that. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I would try all kinds of different things. And at the core of everything I tried was the fact that I wanted to touch people, to reach people somehow. And so I ended up thinking, well, I'll go to graduate school and become a professor. I hated it. So, because people didn't really want to be in those classes that you have to teach, the 300 student classes, beginnings of whatever, introduction to this and that. So I really got tired of it. And when I found myself in community, what I would always do is take care of people and teach them how to practice. And I realized finally that that's what brought me joy and that I was good at it.
Yeah.
And so I started really focusing on learning the best ways to reach others, to try to find the means to do so using my life. I didn't have to be an academic to do that. I could just be a practitioner and use my life and my stories to help people understand they have their own lives, their own stories that are truly gifts of the world.
One of the things that thank you so much for sharing, and one of the things that I noticed about your path was how you felt it in your gut at each point, right? Like when you're in graduate school, you're imagining teaching, you're like, this is not, no,
Right.
this is not where I'm supposed to be. But I do notice that I'm helping people, and that's satisfying, that's fulfilling, you knew it.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I see there've been a couple of questions have come up in chat, and if you'd like to go on mic and ask a question, please, you can raise your digital hand. If you're on camera and you wave, hopefully we'll see it. But the digital hand, what you do is you go to your name under participants and select raise hand. Sometimes it shows up under reactions on the toolbar. So then Gabriel was asking, what were the three, I think it's Noel, actually, if I'm remembering your comments earlier, Noel, what were the three parts of hope again? And can you please reiterate the part about hope and expectation?
That hope and expectation are essentially the same thing. That when we try to define hope, it's always that we expect something to happen as a result of, or through someone, or through ourselves, but we have a hope that it can happen. And so that if we do A, B, or C, then this will happen. That is very simply hope. And the parts of hope, I think the aspiration, commitment. See, sometimes I talk and I don't know what I'm saying.
I can tell you what I wrote down, if that's helpful. I was gonna drop it into chat. At the end of your talk, you said, I have a purpose I alone can fulfill. My liberation is tied up with yours. And unless or until we are all liberated, none of us are free.
Right. Yes, to be convinced of the fact that you have a purpose, that you have mission, that we're not here by accident, the causes and conditions that came together to help us be here. You know, why are we here? Why are we here at this particular time, at this moment, confronting these particular issues? Because we're all uniquely qualified to deal with them somehow. There was a quote from a man, I think his name is Justin Williams, that we are living at the nexus of the dreams of our ancestors and the memories of our descendants.
You say that again?
We're living at the nexus of the dreams of our ancestors and the memories of our descendants. Isn't that a powerful statement? And especially when we think that the only moment we know of that we have absolutely is right now.
Yeah.
We're not guaranteed anything. And so using the idea that now is so critically important to us, it's easy to have hope because you're absolutely in control of now, this moment. And every day you wake up and you have this moment. You have that. It's yours. No one can take it away from you.
Yes.
So what you do with it is so important to your well-being. And there's nothing better than doing your purpose and the kind of glow that comes from embodying the root of your purpose.
Just beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. I have a lot of thoughts and I would just continue chatting with you, but I don't want to hog. I'm already hogging the mic. Other people have questions or comments from Myokei Sensei. I think the drumming has put us into a meditative and very contemplative place.
Well, silence is always good.
Yeah.
I think sometimes that we always try to fill silence rather than to use silence.
Yeah.
You know.
And that silence has allowed a question to surface. Do you see the chat, Myokei?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Who tie trust to my experience of hope. Do you mean trust in myself or trust in purpose? Because when I think about trust, the only person I can trust is myself. And other people are not here for me to trust. I can trust people to be exactly who they are. And I can trust that I can handle exactly who they are. That everything that comes to me is within my area to trust on how I will respond. I think a lot of times we're given the task of trust, and it's all so misunderstood that, you know, we have to trust this, trust that person. And really, the only one we can trust is ourselves. And the strength and intention that we have towards how we live our lives, how we respond to life. Do we respond in negative ways, thus bringing more negativity in our lives? Or do we respond with equanimity, with kindness, with, you know, the ability to take everything in and again, turn poison into medicine. One experience I've had is I remember sharing a story about my life, and a woman came to me and said, "I don't believe that happened to you." And it was like, wow. And it struck me instantly that I was upset when she said that to me. But I didn't say anything to her. I just thanked her and walked away. And I came back later after I had calmed down and ran into her again. And I thanked her because I recognized that she was able to say that and trigger me because it was an area within me that I had not worked on, that I hadn't tackled. And so I thanked her for helping me learn something about myself. And I said to her that I was grateful for the good in her life. And she started to cry. And that was a huge lesson for me of how to turn poison into medicine, that we were able to connect at a deeper level and that we could help each other at that point. And so from that, I've always learned that if I practice, I can trust myself to absolutely embody the teachings that I claim as my guiding principles. And so it's practice every day.
Yeah. Yes. Practice every day. That's yes. Okay. Jim has asked a question, and we maybe just take 2 minutes because we want to. I would sit with you the rest of the afternoon and respect your time, and so.
That it can lead to resentment. Yeah, it can. But expectation grounded in your attachment to a result, to the outcome, is what we call craving. And we always try to eliminate our cravings, because to understand that you don't always get what you want, is to really understand that your life is unfolding exactly as it should for you to become the very best person that you are meant to be. I think about, people always want to win the lottery, for example. Say, if I pray for this, I'm going to win the lottery. And it never happens. I mean, it might happen on occasion for some person, but as a rule, it doesn't happen to everybody who's praying to win the lottery. And the thing to really look at is the lottery for your good? Will it really advance your life? Or are you just satisfying some craving? And could you really handle all of that money? And it doesn't have to be money. Could you handle all of the happiness? I think back to my younger years when folks would chant for, I want to have, a lot of girlfriends. And so they'd end up with a lot of girlfriends and couldn't even answer their door because there were too many. And they would always get in trouble. Or back in the day, people would chant for, drugs and get too many drugs. And guess who showed up at your house when you had too many drugs? The police would be there. So you can understand that, yes, getting exactly what you want could be wonderful, but too much of a good thing never works out for any of us. And that we eventually learn that our expectation is only that we can deal with the uncertainty that comes up.
Yeah.
And if we can do that, if we can handle uncertainty and handle it with grace and dignity, then we're doing what we hope, actually, to live a life that embodies our faith, to live a life that is grounded in our Buddha nature or Christ-like nature, so that we're always putting our best foot forward.